Steaks and ice cream, a detail that always makes me stop and think of my grandfather's prison spoon. The freed men were met by Admiral Noel Gaylor, commander of U.S. forces in the Pacific and former director of the National Security Agency, and Roger Shields, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for POW MIA Affairs. Men whose signatures I would later read on yellowing pieces of paper addressed to my grandparents. My youngest uncle continued to stare at the planes on that screen, as if unbroken eye contact could summon his big brother through the airwaves. Our family would watch the news and get quiet, all of us thinking as we watched another man arrive home. "That's a lucky person there. That's a lucky person there," he tells me. By March 1973, 566 American servicemen were returned to the United States, including 513 men previously listed as missing in action, or MIA. Most were not so lucky. At the close of Operation Homecoming, 1,303 Americans were still unaccounted for. As the rest of the country moved on from the Vietnam War and became swept up in the Watergate scandal, a vocal minority continued to hound the government for answers about what had happened to the men who never came home. My grandparents and mother were leaders among them. Their son and brother, my Uncle Jack, disappeared on March 29, 1972, during a nighttime mission over the officially neutral country of Laos, a country the United States dropped more bombs on between 1964 and 1973 than it did on Germany and Japan combined during World War II. Long, thin Laos, situated between Thailand to the west, China to the north, Vietnam to the east, and Cambodia to the south, was critical to Dwight D. Eisenhower's domino theory of keeping communism at bay. If Laos were lost, the rest of Southeast Asia would follow, he told his National Security Council. By the early 1960s, Laos was a nation at war with itself. Newly free of its colonial overlords, it was teetering between a conservative military government backed by the United States, a communist one supported by Vietnam and China, and a coalition government attempting to precariously balance the two. On the day of his farewell address as president, Eisenhower approved the CIA's covert training of anti-communist forces in the mountains of Laos. His successors in the White House, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Richard Nixon, all approved escalating air support for the guerrilla fighters, a decision that would ultimately make Laos the most heavily bombed country per capita in the world. Of all the prisoners returned in Operation Homecoming, only 9 were captured in Laos, and those lucky men were all in North Vietnamese custody before their release. For years, the United States claimed that all men were brought home, though documents declassified as late as 1994 said that the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, knew of up to 41 Americans left behind in captivity in Laos at war's end. As my father said, how bad would it have looked if they knew there were men there and didn't get them out? By the end of the war in Laos in 1975, 200,000 civilians and members of the military were dead. Almost twice as many were wounded, and 750,000 people, nearly a quarter of the population, had become refugees. In comparison, declassified documents show that 728 Americans died in Laos, though most were working for the CIA and not revealed to the U.S. public for decades. My family's demands for a full accounting of the missing was an uncomfortable reminder of a conflict most Americans would prefer to forget, and a shadow war the government refused to acknowledge. I see my Uncle Kim staring at that screen in 1973 and draw a direct line to Mom 4 decades later, undergoing a Hail Mary clinical trial for her stage 4 cancer, when the Air Force calls to tell her, "We found something." My mother was given months to live and lasted 3 years, long enough to learn what happened to her brother and bring him home. The Lao believe the spirits of the dead coexist with the living, that they must be appeased with offerings and spoken to aloud. In the months after Mom's death, I looked for signs from her everywhere, bargained for her attention, for her time, for dreams of her that would not come. Traveling to the mountains in Laos where her brother was lost, a place she obsessively circled on.